Imagine having the ability to pause pregnancy, not cancel it and not end it, but suspend it completely so that life itself waits for your signal to continue. No growth, no risk, no irreversible commitment until the conditions are right. That sounds like something engineered in a dark, high-tech lab, yet in the wild, there is an animal that has been doing this long before humans even understood reproduction: the kangaroo. But once you hear that, the real questions begin. How does a body pause life without destroying it? What tells it when to stop and when to continue? How long can a tiny microscopic ball of cells even last before it completely fails? And if development is interrupted, how does it resume without a single scratch of damage? These are not simple questions, and the answers are more unsettling than you might expect. Because the deeper you look, the less this looks like a basic animal instinct, and the more it looks like absolute software control. And that is exactly what we are going to uncover today on Time's The Last Paw. At first glance, the kangaroo looks simple and familiar. A mother with a pouch carrying her young, moving through the harsh, cracked landscapes of the Australian outback. Nothing seems out of place. But the moment you look closer, everything you thought you knew about biology begins to break. A single female kangaroo can be pregnant while carrying a tiny newborn joey in her pouch, and at the exact same time, supporting an older offspring that still depends on her for nourishment. 3 different lives, 3 completely different stages of development, all managed by one single body with a level of parallel processing that should be physically impossible. And here is where it becomes difficult to ignore. The outback is a brutal, unpredictable graveyard where rainfall can vanish for months on end. If the environment collapses, if food becomes scarce, or conditions turn hostile, the kangaroo does not continue blindly like other mammals. It hits the pause button. The microscopic embryo inside her uterus does not die, it does not degrade, and it does not restart from the beginning. It enters a state of suspended animation known as embryonic diapause. It drops its metabolic engine to near zero and sits drifting in the dark like a spaceship lost in deep space, completely hidden from the passage of time. It simply waits in this frozen state for weeks, or even up to 11 months, until the outside world becomes stable enough to support life again. When that moment finally comes, development continues exactly from where it stopped, without damage, without delay, and without compromise. This is not just survival. This is complete control over timing at a biological level. And the engineering becomes even more precise. While that embryo is frozen, the mother is running a dual-channel milk factory. She can produce 2 completely different formulas of milk from her body at the exact same time, each tailored to the specific needs of each offspring. One formula is low-fat, supporting a fragile newborn that is still developing inside the pouch. The other teat pumps a high-fat formula to support the older teenager Joey at her feet that requires massive energy for faster growth. 2 separate nutritional systems operating simultaneously from one body, with no confusion and 0 error. At this point, it stops being impressive and starts becoming unsettling, because this is not care in the way humans understand it, and it is not driven by emotion. It is pure strategy. Every single process is optimized around one cold calculation: survival probability. If conditions are favorable, the pipeline moves forward. If conditions collapse, everything slows down or stops entirely. There is no wasted energy and no blind commitment to a process that might fail. Scientists have studied this mechanism for decades. They know that the moment a newborn joey enters the pouch and begins to suckle, it sends an urgent neural signal straight to the mother's brain. Her pituitary gland immediately floods her system with a hormone called prolactin. Prolactin acts as the master biological circuit breaker, aggressively shutting down the progesterone needed for the next embryo to grow. But that textbook explanation does not go far enough, because it still does not fully answer how those frozen cells can remain viable in total stasis for so long without rotting away. In almost every other mammal on Earth, development follows a strict, unforgiving sequence where timing is everything. Any disruption leads to absolute failure. Cells break down, systems collapse, and life does not simply wait for a better day. Yet inside the kangaroo, it does exactly that. When the suckling stops and the hormone clears, the embryo wakes up and continues seamlessly, as if nothing ever happened. This is where science reaches its limit. We can describe parts of the process, but we cannot replicate it with any real precision, which means there is something happening at a cellular level that we still do not fully understand. And that matters more than it seems, because when you step back and look at what this represents, it isn't just an interesting animal trivia fact, it is a masterclass in risk management. The kangaroo is not reacting impulsively to its environment. It is managing the future based on current data. Every decision its body makes, whether to continue development, pause it, or allocate resources, is based on whether survival is statistically likely. Now compare that to us. Once a human pregnancy or major biological process begins, we have no built-in system that allows for a strategic delay. Everything moves forward like a runaway train, whether our personal environment is ready for it or not. That total lack of control shapes how we make decisions, how we plan our lives, and how we deal with uncertainty. If humans had this ability, it would completely redefine modern medicine, reshape how families are built, and change how we manage survival in unstable times. But that level of control does not exist for us. It exists out there, in the dirt, which forces a difficult realization. This is not a simple animal with a quirky trait. It is a system that has been refined over millions of years to avoid unnecessary risk and maximize efficiency in a way that humans are still trying to figure out. Most people believe resilience means pushing forward no matter what. We are conditioned to apply more effort, more grind, and more pressure, regardless of how toxic, dry, or exhausted our environment is. But the kangaroo shows us a completely different version of strength. When conditions turn against it, it does not force progress. It protects its resources, delays the outcome, and waits until survival is no longer a reckless gamble. Then, and only then, it continues from exactly where it left off, without loss and without wasted energy. That is not weakness. That is absolute control. Because real resilience is not about forcing growth in the wrong conditions. It is about knowing when to hold back, so that when the right moment finally comes, the outcome is not just survival, but total dominance. So the question becomes unavoidable for you and me. Are you stubbornly forcing progress in an environment that cannot support it right now? Or are you disciplined enough to pause, protect your core resources, and move only when the conditions are finally in your favor? This is the last pour, and some lessons are only learned from the wild,